Hello everybody and welcome back to another not applicable Formula 1 video. I hope that you're well. We're going to talk Mercedes. We are live this morning for the Mercedes W14 launch, and I feel like Mercedes are in a weird place right now. For me, it's stick or twist time, right? They had the 2022 season. They're more than capable of understanding the aerodynamics and understanding the progress they made throughout that 2022 season. But now it's kind of stick or twist. Do you stick with the zero pod, no pod, whatever you want to call it, design for the 2023 season? Or do you go the way of lots of other teams and kind of go for this kind of hybrid Red Bull, Ferrari style look, right? So we've got like Haas, obviously, steering towards like the Ferrari side of things. Aston Martin's kind of still keeping towards the Red Bull side of things, and then very much people in between those two. You could argue that like the McLaren is a little bit of a hybrid, the Alfa Romeo is a bit of a hybrid of those two concepts together. Do Mercedes finally kind of give in a little bit and go forward with that as their idea? We're going to have to kind of wait and see, and hopefully they release their full car. Obviously, Ferrari yesterday just put it all out on the line. It was on track. It was there for us to see. It was everything that we wanted from a car launch. Nothing hidden, I guess, because they've released a little bit closer to the testing in Bahrain anyway. Like, what are the teams going to be able to do with this information in a week? Maybe not too much, but also, like, there's lots of teams, Red Bull, for instance, who are like, nope, we're not going to show you our car because people are going to be copying us because we literally just won both championships. So we're going to keep that under wraps and kind of move forward on our own. Let's talk about Mercedes, though. And Mercedes sort of moving into this season and what we can kind of expect. I've got the team guide again up on the Formula 1 website. It was written a few weeks ago now, though, but it still kind of stacks up to where Mercedes are and where we're at with those two drivers. Let's talk about those to begin with, right? Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. It was phenomenal to see those two together, I think. I think Mercedes now have got the strongest driver pairing. I kind of went on about Ferrari having the strongest driver pairing in Leclerc and Sainz for a very long time. I think it is now Mercedes that have the strongest driver pairing. I was 50-50 on whether or not George Russell would step up to the plate and be that exceptional driver that we kind of expected him to be, but there's always that pressure. There was always that extra sort of, you see it in lots of sports. You can do it at a smaller team. You know, you're the big fish in a small pond. Can you then step up to a Mercedes where you've got a 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton, where you've got the characters like Toto Wolff, James Vowles, who's obviously moving over to Williams, but had been so successful at Mercedes and there for so long as well. You know, this team that they've built up over time that has been so incredibly dominant in Formula 1. And George Russell was expected to go up into that, right? Who is revealing their car today? Mercedes, my friend. Mercedes are revealing their car this morning in about sort of 15 minutes time. But as I said, George Russell, 1 win, 1 pole position, 9 podiums. He was incredibly good in terms of his Mercedes debut. I don't think you could have really asked much more from him. I know there's obviously the argument that Lewis Hamilton had to deal with the fact that they were trying lots of things on his car towards the beginning of the season. Therefore, George Russell was able to build up a little bit of a lead in terms of the championships. And Lewis Hamilton was much better in the second half of the season, got lots and lots of second places. Obviously, George Russell did get that win in Brazil. So there's a lot of debate as to who had the better season between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell. I think it's very, very close between the two of them. And I think it's going to still be very, very close indeed in 2023. Depending on sort of where Mercedes fall, are they going to be the fastest? Are they going to be the third fastest? Somewhere in that range. I feel like we're going to see both of these drivers properly battling it out. You know, at times last season, we saw them almost battle it out. We didn't see them on the same piece of track, on the same tyres very often. But we saw them like almost occasionally start to think about battling it out together. But a lot of the time they were working together, obviously, to try and get Mercedes as many points as possible, especially towards the beginning of the season where it was like damage limitations. They were just trying to hold on, keep themselves in front of like Alfa Romeo and Bottas. They were trying to keep themselves in front of the Alpines in terms of the Drivers' Championship and Constructors' Championship as well. Like, it was very, very tricky towards the beginning of the season, but they kind of worked it out towards the end. And then Lewis Hamilton, we haven't really touched upon yet, sort of said how good I think George Russell was. Lewis Hamilton also, an incredible season from Lewis Hamilton, considering the car that he was given. I know it's the first season in Formula 1. He hasn't picked up a victory, but there was lots of races that if they'd have gone just slightly differently, or if Max Verstappen had had any kind of issues beyond well, I suppose he had that issue of DRS and occasionally had a pit stop go wrong, etc., etc. But over the course of the season, you're looking at like those first 2 out of 3 races, and then from then onwards, it was pretty much plain sailing for Max Verstappen. And occasionally, towards the end of the season, you usually see a team not care enough, sort of take it down a step almost. And Max Verstappen did not do that. Red Bull did not do that. They kept going every single Grand Prix and kept racing at the absolute top level every single Grand Prix. And it was a little bit disappointing if you're a Lewis Hamilton fan, I guess, obviously, because you wanted to see him get that win. You wanted him to continue that that incredible record that he's got. But I don't think he'll be that concerned about that record. I think it's more so that he wants to come in next season, add to those 103 wins, 103 pole positions, 191 podiums. Like, we're looking at an absolutely phenomenal driver in Lewis Hamilton. Let's not get that wrong. But I do think that this battle between these two is going to be very interesting to watch. Like, when is the turning point for me? I think last season, Lewis Hamilton was still the better racing driver. I think George Russell got sometimes a little bit more out of the car in qualifying. But if you look at just general race pace, Lewis Hamilton was still the faster of the two every single time around for me. You look at George Russell, he's definitely going to be making steps forwards in that Mercedes team. It almost cost him a little bit how long he spent in Williams, right? But now he's going to be making steps up. I think they're going to be even closer in terms of race pace. And I said it will be interesting to see when George Russell kind of displaces Lewis Hamilton, or if he ever can displace Lewis Hamilton before Lewis Hamilton then just gives up and retires out of Formula One. Lewis was the team's test pilot earlier on. Yeah, exactly. He just basically, you look at like the first 7 or 8 races, you could argue, and Lewis Hamilton's car is just changing so rapidly. You can even go to like Azerbaijan as far as that into the season where, as far as Azerbaijan into the season, and still Lewis Hamilton is really struggling with the balance of that car. And Mercedes are really struggling to get it quite right because they're changing so much every single weekend. And you can't do that. You need consistency when you're a Formula One driver. You want to be able to trust the car to do what you think it's going to do. You know what I mean? Like, if you're hurtling towards a wall at 300 kilometers an hour, and like you have to brake and turn right before you hit into that wall, you want to be able to trust it, right? You want to be able to brake as late as possible, but to do so, you have to be able to trust what the car is going to do, and the car is going to perform for you. And Lewis Hamilton just didn't have that trust in the car towards the beginning of the season because of how many things they had to change as they were going through those first few races. As we talked about, though, as a collective, Mercedes collected all bar one of 16 drivers and constructors titles grabs between 2014 and 2021. Like, they were absolutely dominant. 2022 marks the end of that era. Red Bull obviously picking up both championships. And we've kind of touched upon the fact that early season struggles, porpoising, that word kind of left the Formula One lingo for a little while. I wonder if that will be back for 2023. But they just didn't quite have it. Upgrades late in the season. Turning point, first time they could fight since 2021. Lewis Hamilton diced with Verstappen several times. Sao Paulo being that moment. What? Impressively leading home. Oh, I thought it meant Hamilton's home race at Sao Paulo. I know he's like Brazilian-ish, but he's not quite fully calling that a home Grand Prix, I don't think. Third in the constructor standings behind Red Bull and Ferrari. It's clear the midfield represented solid limitations. Clear of the midfield represented solid damage limitations for the four. Yeah. Little bit of history between Mercedes. Greatest achievement. What is their greatest achievement in their opinion? Mastering the move between 2014. Okay. 7 drivers' titles. 6 for Hamilton, 1 for Rosberg. This season, though. This season is weird for Mercedes. As I said, it's stick or twist, right? It's stick or twist. It's stick with the zero pod or twist and go for more of a Ferrari design, or possibly even more of a what am I saying? A Mercedes sort of hybrid between Ferrari and Red Bull and the zero pod, and where can they find their position almost in all of that. Can they find something that goes their way a little bit more? What do we feel though? Like if Mercedes come second in the Constructors' Championship, obviously that is a step forward, a marked step forward. You could argue that they, were battling for second towards the end of last season. I don't think that was ever really on the cards though for me. I think Ferrari, just towards the beginning of the season, has shown that if they needed to, they could have probably bumped up those engines a little bit and guaranteed themselves second in the constructor standings. But with Lewis Hamilton and George Russell coming into this season on good form, with good drives towards the end of last season, probably carrying a little bit of momentum. I know it's one of those things, it's tricky to carry momentum from like November to March, because it is such a long break in the Formula One season, right? You get 3-4 months off if you're a Formula One driver. It's completely reset and reload for this season. But I think they are bringing a little bit of momentum in. I think they can be happy about some of the drives they had towards the end of last year, and therefore, like, they can. We're almost there. They can start to think about building up to this season straight away, almost like they can build up towards this year without having to think about it too much. Oh. Lewis Hamilton hasn't had any breakfast. Sorry, the Mercedes stream is like clicking off. We've got 3 minutes, 37 seconds, 36 seconds to go. I'll show you this little bit. It's not the launch itself, but a little bit of a green room insight. Lewis Hamilton, Mick Schumacher, George Russell. Seems a little bit weird. Oh, George in the middle. Okay. It's a bit of a weird insight that they put a camera in the green room. Mick Schumacher there as well, though. We haven't touched upon Mick Schumacher yet and kind of the impact that he might be able to have on this Mercedes team. Obviously, he'll only come in if Lewis Hamilton or George Russell can't make a Grand Prix. Although we do see that quite a lot in Formula One. Like, considering what we have in terms of like the Formula One structure and... A little bit of insight. Toto Wolff there as well in the control. This is very strange. They've got this kind of build up / green room chat. I think you can tell that they know they're on camera though as well. I feel like this is not how they would chat to each other in general day-to-day life, right? Are we supposed to be seeing this? It just seems so odd. This is like the kind of thing that I think about. I was going to say discuss with myself. I think about before coming on air, but like I don't show you guys that, if you know what I mean. Like, it's very behind the scenesy. A minute and a half to go until the launch. We're getting a little rundown. Lewis Hamilton is going to be next to Toto Wolff, George Russell in the middle, Mick Schumacher on the end. Is that a sign? Is that number one driver next to the boss? Down to testing driver as far away? I don't think so. I think Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, there isn't really a definitive number one there. I think it will only become a number one, number two situation if one of them is clear in the championship. Be interesting to see if George Russell is clear in the championship. So how heavily he is able to dictate as being like the number one in that team. If he's able to kind of really take hold. Toto Wolff forgot his shoes. See, this is the insight we want. This is the insight we need from these Formula One events. Imagine forgetting your shoes. Here we go. Look, it's kind of a bit of a weird build-up thing that they've got going on. Whoa. We are underway. I wonder how much of this they'll kind of go for, you know what I mean? How long will they string this out? Is it going to be like an AlphaTauri style thing where they're just like, here you go, there it is, and it's done? Or is it going to be more of a Ferrari, Red Bull style thing where they're like longing it out? And they're like, ooh, building it up. Aston Martin was the worst one. Building it up for so long, and then it was just the same. It's just the same. They're like, oh, is it going to be different? No, it's exactly the same. The boys. Oh, it's George's birthday. What a man. I think it's a bit of a loaded question to begin with, isn't it? Asking about Brazil, how Brazil went versus the rest of the season. No sound. Yeah, I don't want to take away the views from Mercedes, if I'm honest. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but like if you kind of want to watch it, I feel like you should watch it through the Mercedes thing, and then maybe have me on in the background as well. You know what I mean? That is fair. I think it's a bit of a weird scenario for Toto to be in as well, though, right? Because he's been just so used to winning, and he's been into that team basically straight off the bat. He's been able to just win, just go into Mercedes, win, 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 win. Is all Toto has done throughout his entire career. I suppose this is the final or the first kind of big opportunity for him to show if he's able to guide a team to like a bounce back almost. If he's able to guide a team through this kind of turmoil, through this kind of downturn. I think that's fair. George Russell saying, you know, if you'd have looked at it at the start of the season, they'd have been disappointed with third in the Constructors' Championship. But if you kind of look at the season as a whole and you kind of look at how the season went, there's lots of positives to take away from that. And obviously, they're going to be positive about the car and about the team moving forward. And this is the whole point of today, right? To show off the new car and to be positive about the 2023 season, almost guarantee or try and show that your fans want to move forward and want to show that they can be that next step forward and maybe start battling for wins more consistently again. But Red Bull are so far ahead, man. Ready, motivated. I like it. I like George Russell. I do think George Russell is one of those weird characters that people find very polarizing. Sometimes they absolutely love him. Sometimes they absolutely hate him. And like sometimes kind of a bit of an in-between. I suppose it depends on like your perspective, especially on like some of the incidents towards the end of the last season or just during last season. There was a lot of crashes that George Russell kind of instigated, let's say, but got away with and didn't get punished too heavily for. And lots of people are not massively happy about how those things were dealt with George in particular. They expected him to be maybe punished a little bit more. Ooh, Lewis Hamilton planning to stay a little bit long. I don't know how long Lewis Hamilton will stay. Like, this is the talking point every single year, right? It's like, Lewis Hamilton, how long will he stay at Mercedes? How long will he stay in Formula One? Like, he doesn't have to stay with Mercedes. Maybe he jumps over to, like, Audi or something. Be a bit of a weird move, but a fun move for him. But yeah, that's kind of the talking point all the time of Lewis Hamilton, right? Whereas he just looks focused. He does look ready and raring to go. And like, not saying he didn't last season, but I don't know. There's a different air around Lewis Hamilton at the minute for me. I think because of last season and also the season before, and just the way that Mercedes have kind of fizzled a little bit. Lewis Hamilton ended up so disappointed at the end of 2021, and then to come into 2022 and want to be that kind of driver that can bounce back, but not given the tools to be able to do so. I think it's a new Lewis Hamilton we're looking at in 2023. A kind of reinvigorated Lewis Hamilton a little bit. Couple of championships that have slipped away from him now, or a couple of years worth of championships that have slipped away from him now, whereas he was just going back to back to back to back to back championships. It felt like forever. He now has this different perspective to him, and maybe that gives him an opportunity to stay even a little bit longer, because he has that opportunity to do even more so. I like George. He should have replaced Bottas a year sooner. I think he probably would have replaced Bottas a year sooner. I think he'd have liked to replace Bottas a year sooner too. I think even Mercedes would have liked him to replace Bottas a year sooner. But Williams did such a good job with George Russell's contract. Like, just to the extent where he was just locked in. They could basically do absolutely nothing about it. George Russell was just tethered to that Williams car. And yeah, you've got to hand it to the Williams team. They did an exceptional job at making sure that they got that contract absolutely airtight, to the point where Mercedes couldn't really do anything about it. And George Russell had to stay for an extra year, possibly even two. Like, George Russell has talked about the fact that 3 years was too long. 2 years was maybe even a touch too long for him as well. He wanted to be right up there to begin with. You know, he started to see Verstappen win championships. He started to see Leclerc win races, Norris get podium after podium after podium. Like, he started to see these drivers that he had beaten in Formula 2, or at least raced with in Formula 2 and kind of battled with, or even in just the rest of the junior series, right? And similar to like Albon was at Red Bull. Like, George Russell's seeing all of these drivers that he's grown up with and that he's been in and around, and he's proven that he's as good as, if not better than, at points. And he's not able to really take that step forward in the same way that they were. So I think he's also very, very hungry. I think you can see both Mercedes drivers this season come into this really, really hungry for more. Because I think George Russell coming into Mercedes would have expected more from his first season. You know, if he'd have come in 2 years ago with that car that was winning championships, if he'd have come into the Mercedes team straight off the bat in like 2019 or even 2020, he'd have loads of race wins to his name by now. I feel, you know, he'd have maybe even 8 or 9 race wins, maybe some pole positions as well. Like, he'd be living a much nicer life than he is in terms of like trophy cabinet at home, right? At the moment, he's just got that pole position and that one win in Sao Paulo, and then a couple of podiums here and there over the course of the season. Few podiums, obviously the podium at Williams as well, that we have to not forget. But I think George is very hungry in this season. What's Toto saying? Just talking about kind of the general day-to-day of Formula One, I guess, and how it's changed over the last few years, because we have had like a massive influx of especially American fans coming to Formula One. Talking about Vegas. What a weird thing to bring up. The Vegas Grand Prix. Sure, they're very excited. Toto Wolff giving gambling advice on the Mercedes launch. Limit your spend. Don't. When the fun stops, stop. It's basically what Toto Wolff, bless him. Here we go then. The W14. Let's see what it is. Are we going to see the actual W14 car, do you think? Or is this... Oh, it looks black. It looks black. They're back to black. Have they gone zero pod? I can't really tell. What, can they turn the lights on a little bit? There we go. Oh, okay. They've stuck with it. They have stuck with their design feature. Although they've got a bit of a weird kind of letterboxy inlet at the front. I can't actually tell. Favorite livery so far? It's hard to look past the Alfa Romeo, you know. I do quite like it. It is kind of zero poddy, but also it's got kind of a letterbox inlet. What is that? Like almost like a secondary little wing underneath. It looks strange. It looks odd, is how I would say it. Although it is matte black. The little blue banding. And that's about it. The Mercedes stars. But very, very, very minimalist. Very, very, very lightweight. Very, very, very little paint on there is basically what we are seeing from the Mercedes team. It does look very cool. All right, we've seen the reveal now, so I'm going to show you. It looks very good. I do really like the back to black. I do prefer the silver, but I can completely understand why they've gone back to the black, because they went back to silver kind of the worst time, right? If they'd have just stuck with black, then they could have just continued on in that vein, and then we wouldn't be talking about the fact that they've now removed all that paint again. Back to the black livery, though. You can see they're taking a lot of the paintwork off of this Mercedes car. But I'm very interested in the side pods. I want like a front view, but from behind the front wing. Still zero pod, though. Or minimal pod, however you want to call it. It's sort of like they've gone for a Mercedes design zero pod, and then they've also tried to integrate almost a little bit of the Red Bull style letterbox inlet on the side as well. Does it have those cooling louvres? Like the oh no, it doesn't, I don't think. Like the Ferrari. Wow. I'm just trying to... Oh, why did they change? So, like, if you look at this inlet, this almost looks quite tall. But then there's a... Oh, no, that's not. I thought this was a kind of a letterbox inlet. This is some kind of, like, design for holding the mirror. And then it kind of swoops in to this very tall pillar-like inlet. Okay. I quite like it. I quite like it. It's gonna be an interesting. Yeah, you can kind of see it better here if I pause it. So you've got this kind of shelf design over here, and then a much sort of boxier inlet, a much sort of taller, thinner inlet. So like lots of teams gone for like the letterbox, right? Very wide, horizontal. Whereas this is kind of very tall, and therefore the zero pod design quite like it. I quite like it. I hope that it works. I hope that performance-wise it works. Otherwise, it's going to look very, very silly. Because they have stuck. We can confirm Mercedes have stuck rather than twisted. I thought they might change, you know. I thought they might, you know, take the 2022 season on the chin and kind of develop their philosophy differently. But they clearly have faith in what they have been putting together. And they clearly have faith in the team. And I guess, why wouldn't you, right? You've won multiple championships over and over and over again. But it's interesting. It's interesting. I'd love to know your thoughts, though. What do we feel like with Mercedes in this season? They have stuck. They've still gone zero pod. They've still decided to go towards that design. Even with everybody else kind of moving away, well, very far. Well, no, the problem was nobody was even close to the zero pod design to begin with. But also lots of teams have moved away from it. And because they've moved away from it, we're also looking at now Mercedes being even further from the rest of the pack, possibly. Or, if they've got it right, kind of being the innovator of the next step, right? The next forward step. See if I can find a picture. That we can delve into a little bit more so. The Patronus. There we go. Back in black. Indeed. So yeah, it's still got the kind of zero pod design to it. And therefore, it's kind of got these... Oh! Okay, that's not what I wanted. Not what I wanted. Yeah, these tall kind of pillar-like... What is going on? Come on. Come on. That is very true. It was the clearance of the car, but also I just felt like everybody was kind of going for this design feature, right, where they move away and move away from whatever they were doing and move towards either Red Bull or Ferrari. Mercedes have come in. They've got this kind of zero pod. It's still going to be very different to every other car. Interesting to see how this flooring works. Lots of changes to the kind of sides of the flooring as well. I mean, it looks good. It looks good. The black livery, the matte black. I guess very, again, sort of exposed carbon fiber. You can see lots of exposed carbon fiber. Kind of got a little bit of paint running up the middle of the nose. Obviously, the blue banding. And this is all exposed carbon fiber. So they're clearly worried about weight as well, that Mercedes. Like, we've seen the Red Bull car. They stuck with, like, their purple. Although it wasn't really. So maybe their livery will just be different by the time they get round. Because they've realised now that everybody else has gone black. Literally, everyone on the grid's been like, oh, what? Should we just integrate black into the design this year? Yes. Yes, we should. Like, Mercedes have literally got even just black paint. And then blue and silver paint. And then obviously the sponsors and decals on there. A little bit of red. A little bit of red. But apart from that, it's very Mercedes, isn't it? Very different, very their own, very just like we're not gonna bend to what other people are doing. We are just gonna be Mercedes and we're just gonna do our own thing. And we believe in the philosophy that we've got. Still nothing on the wheel caps though. Thought they might add something. Most teams have kind of got a little bit. I do like this swoosh though, and it does show you like that kind of design that they've got going on. So even though there is a zero pod, well, they have got a few of those cooling louvres sort of running down, Ferrari-esque, but very different. Very, very different. It's nice to see though that all three top teams have gone for different designs in that way. Like, you've got Ferrari sticking with their plan, Red Bull sticking with their plan, seemingly, we'll assume, unless they've moved in more of a Ferrari direction, which would be a shame because lots of teams have moved in a very Red Bull direction. And if Red Bull are moving away from that, then they're like, oh, God. But Mercedes also kind of going for their own thing, going for their own design. And Mercedes looking like they could be very, very competitive. But that is the release of the Mercedes car. We've talked Mercedes, we've talked Red Bull, we've talked Mercedes, we've talked Hamilton, we've talked Russell is what I was going to say, not Red Bull. And yeah, I'm going to leave it there because we've got a few other bits and pieces to get going on today. I'm probably going to be streaming either later today or definitely for the Alpine launch tomorrow. So keep your eyes out. Thank you so much again, and I'll see you next time.